The envelope was still warm from the printer when I found it. I remember that detail because it felt wrong. Everything about that Tuesday felt wrong, starting with the moment I walked into my husband's home office looking for a stapler and found a bank statement instead, one that showed $41,000 had vanished from our joint savings account in 6 weeks. My name is Claire Whitfield. I'm 44 years old, I teach 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary, and until that afternoon in March, I believed my marriage was the one solid thing in my life. Mark? I called down the hallway, the paper trembling in my hand. Mark, can you come here? He appeared in the doorway wearing the gray sweater I'd given him for Christmas, and for a second, seeing his familiar face, I almost talked myself out of what I was about to ask. Almost. What's wrong? He said. I held up the statement. Where is our money going? Something moved behind his eyes, not guilt exactly, but something close to it. A flicker, gone as fast as it came. It's under control, Claire. Under control? My voice cracked. $41,000 is not a rounding error, Mark. That's half of what your father left you. Where is it going? He rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he had when he was choosing his words carefully. I've been helping someone out. It's complicated. Helping who? I can't explain it right now. Those 5 words broke something open in me. 22 years of marriage, and my husband was standing in our hallway telling me he couldn't explain where our life savings were going. Is there someone else? The question came out before I could stop it, ugly and raw. Mark's face went pale. God, no. Claire, it's not that. It's nothing like that. Then what is it like? I was crying now, and I hated myself for it, hated that my hands were shaking. Your father worked 30 years at that plant. He left you that money so we could finally fix the roof. So Emily could go to grad school without loans. And you're just, what, giving it away? Gambling it? What, Mark? I'm not gambling, he said quietly. I would never do that to you. Then prove it. Show me. He looked at me for a long moment, and something in his expression shut like a door closing. I can't. Not yet. I want you to understand something about my husband. Mark Whitfield is not a secretive man. In 22 years, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd kept something from me, and every single time, it had been about a surprise party or a gift. He was, if anything, painfully transparent, the kind of man who apologized to furniture when he bumped into it. So this new version of him, this man standing in front of me with his jaw set and his eyes refusing to meet mine, felt like a stranger wearing my husband's sweater. You're scaring me, I whispered. I know, he said. I'm sorry. Just trust me a little longer. Trust you? I laughed, and it came out sharp and broken. You want me to trust you while you drain our savings account and refuse to tell me why? That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe like he was sleeping, though I don't think either of us slept at all. Every worst-case scenario ran through my mind on a loop. A gambling addiction he'd hidden for years. A secret family somewhere. Blackmail. Debt from something he'd never told me about. 3 days later, my sister Denise called. I saw Mark, she said, her voice careful in a way that put me instantly on alert. At the Riverside Motel. Yesterday afternoon. The Riverside Motel. The cheap, run-down place off Route 9 that mostly rented rooms by the week to people between addresses. What was he doing there? My mouth had gone dry. I don't know, Claire. But he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. Youngish. Maybe 30. They were carrying grocery bags into one of the rooms. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair. The phone pressed so tight against my ear it hurt. Are you sure it was him? I'm sure, Denise said. Claire, I think you need to see this for yourself. I didn't sleep at all that night. And the next morning, while Mark was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would do in 22 years of marriage. I followed him. I sat in my car across the street from the Riverside Motel, sunglasses on even though the sky was overcast, feeling like a character in a bad movie. My hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. At 9:15, Mark's blue Honda pulled into the lot. I watched him get out, carrying 2 paper grocery bags, and walked to room 14. He knocked twice, a pattern, like a signal. The door opened, and a young woman stood there. Denise was right. She looked to be in her early 30s, with tired eyes and dark circles that even from a distance I could see. She took one of the bags from him and said something I couldn't hear. Mark smiled at her, the kind of soft, familiar smile I hadn't seen him give anyone but me in years. My stomach dropped straight through the floor of the car. Then a child appeared in the doorway behind her. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, in a purple shirt, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The girl reached her arms up toward Mark. And my husband of 22 years, picked her up like he'd done it 1,000 times before, and she laughed and put her small hand against his cheek. I don't remember starting my car. I don't remember the drive home. I remember gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white, and I remember the sound that came out of me, something between a sob and a scream, once I was alone in our driveway. A secret family. That's what it was. 22 years, 3 children raised together, a mortgage paid off just last spring, and my husband had another life. Another woman. Another child. And he was funding it with his father's inheritance, money that was supposed to be ours. When Mark came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the lights off. Claire? He flipped the switch. Why are you sitting in the dark? Who is she? My voice didn't even sound like mine. He froze. Who is who? The woman at the Riverside Motel. Room 14. The little girl in the purple shirt who calls you. I couldn't even finish the sentence. I saw you, Mark. I saw you carrying groceries to them. I saw you pick her up. The color drained completely from his face. He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, like his legs had stopped working. Claire, it's not what you think. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare say that to me. That is exactly the sentence men say right before they confirm it's exactly what I think. I need you to listen to me. Please. His voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I saw real tears in his eyes. That's not an affair. I swear to you on my father's grave, that is not an affair. Then what is it? I was shouting now, all the careful composure I'd held on to for days finally collapsing. Explain it to me, Mark. Explain the woman. Explain the child. Explain the money. He put his face in his hands, and his shoulders started to shake. My husband, a man I had watched stay stoic through his own father's funeral, was sitting in our kitchen sobbing like something inside him had finally broken. Her name is Sarah, he said, his voice muffled through his hands. And the little girl's name is Grace. I don't want their names, Mark. I want to know who they are to you. He lifted his head, and what he said next stopped my heart cold. Sarah is my daughter, Claire. The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. What did you just say? She's my daughter. From before I met you. I didn't know she existed until 8 weeks ago. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for this to somehow make sense, but his face held nothing but raw, exhausted grief. That's impossible, I whispered. You would have told me. We've been together since we were 22 years old. You would have told me if you had a child from before. I didn't know, he said again, and this time his voice broke completely. I swear to you, Claire, I didn't know she existed until a woman named Patricia Hale showed up at my office 8 weeks ago and told me the truth about something that happened before we ever met. Something I didn't even remember happening the way she said it did. My mind was spinning, trying to catch up, trying to fit these new pieces into a puzzle that made no sense. Then who is Grace? Mark closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there were tears streaming freely down his face. Grace is my granddaughter, he said. And Claire, she's dying. The words hung in the kitchen air like smoke. She's dying, Mark said again, quieter this time, as if saying it twice might make it less true. Grace has a rare form of leukemia. Sarah found out 4 months ago. That's why Patricia, Sarah's adoptive mother, came looking for me. She needed a bone marrow match, and none of Sarah's adoptive family were compatible. She thought I might be. I sat frozen, my anger draining out of me so fast it left me hollow. Are you? A match? I'm not, he said. I got tested right away. I wasn't compatible. But I couldn't just walk away after that, Claire. I found out I had a daughter I never knew about, and in the same conversation, I found out she has a sick little girl who needed help nobody in her family could give her. So the money, I said slowly, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. The $41,000. Medical bills. Experimental treatment insurance wouldn't cover. Rent, because Sarah had to quit her job to be at the hospital every day. Sarah's husband left when Grace got sick, he couldn't handle it, and he's not in the picture anymore. She had nobody, Claire. Nobody but a mother who found out I existed and looked me up out of desperation. I felt tears sliding down my own face now, but they were different tears than they'd been an hour ago. Why didn't you tell me? Mark, why would you let me think? Why would you let me believe you were destroying our marriage instead of just telling me? He looked down at his hands, ashamed. Because I didn't know how. Claire, I got a phone call 8 weeks ago from a stranger telling me I fathered a child in 1998 with a woman named Renee Castellano, someone I dated for 4 months right before I met you. I didn't even remember her clearly. And suddenly I had a 26-year-old daughter, and she had a 4-year-old daughter, and that daughter was dying, and I didn't know how to walk into our kitchen and say all of that without destroying everything you thought you knew about me. So instead you let me think you were having an affair, I said. You let me sit awake at night terrified our marriage was over. I know. His voice was barely audible. I know, and I'm so sorry. I kept telling myself I'd explain it once I understood it myself. Once I met Sarah. Once I knew if Grace was going to be okay. I just needed a little more time. I stood up and walked to the window, needing distance, needing air. Outside, the streetlight flickered against the dark. 22 years of marriage, and I had never once doubted this man's honesty until 3 weeks ago, and it turned out the dishonesty had been protecting me from something, not betraying me with something. I need to meet them, I finally said. Mark looked up, surprised. What? Sarah. Grace. I need to meet them, Mark. If they're your family, they're my family too. That's not a question. His face crumpled with relief and disbelief. You're not angry? I am furious, I said honestly. I am furious that you let me spend 3 weeks thinking my marriage was falling apart. I am furious that you didn't trust me enough to bring this to me the day you found out. But I am not angry that you have a daughter you didn't know about, and I am certainly not angry that you're trying to save a dying child. Those aren't things to be angry about, Mark. Those are things we face together. He came around the table and pulled me into his arms, and I let him, even though part of me was still reeling, still trying to rebuild the last 3 weeks with this new information. There's something else, he said against my hair, and I felt his body tense. What? The doctors found a second potential donor match last week. Someone in Sarah's biological family they hadn't tested yet. Who? Mark pulled back and looked at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite read, hope, and fear, tangled together. Emily, he said. Our daughter, Claire. The tests came back yesterday. Emily is a 90% match for Grace's bone marrow transplant. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Emily doesn't know any of this exists, I whispered. She doesn't know she has a sister. She doesn't know she has a niece. And you want to ask her to undergo a medical procedure for a family she's never even met? Mark's silence was answer enough. And that's when my phone rang. It was Emily. Mom, she said, her voice tight and strange. I need to talk to you and Dad. Right now. I just got a call from someone named Sarah Castellano, and she said she's my sister. Emily arrived 20 minutes later, still in her scrubs from her nursing shift, her face pale and her eyes wide with the particular kind of shock that comes from having your entire understanding of your family rearranged in a single phone call. Somebody better start explaining, she said, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. Because I just spent 20 minutes on the phone with a woman I've never met who told me I have a sister and a niece, and that the niece needs my bone marrow or she might die. So. Talk. Mark told her everything, Renee Castellano, the 4-month relationship before he met me, Patricia showing up at his office, Sarah, Grace's diagnosis, the money, all of it. Emily listened without saying a word, her jaw tight, her eyes shifting between her father and me like she was trying to figure out whose side to be angry on. When he finished, the kitchen was silent for a long moment. So you've known for 8 weeks, Emily finally said, and you didn't tell me. And you let Mom think you were cheating on her. And you were about to ask me to donate bone marrow to a 4-year-old I've never met, for a sister I didn't know existed, without ever sitting me down and explaining any of it first. Emily. No, let me finish. Her voice shook, but she held it steady. I'm not angry that Grace is sick. I'm not angry that you have another daughter, Dad, that's not your fault, you didn't know. I'm angry that once again, in this family, everyone decided I couldn't handle the truth until it was already an emergency. I flinched, because she wasn't entirely wrong, and I think Mark felt it too. You're right, he said quietly. I should have told you the moment I found out. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell my own daughter that she had a sister she'd never met, especially when I found out that sister's little girl might die without help. Emily's anger seemed to deflate slightly, replaced by something rawer. Is she really a 90% match? That's what the doctor said, Mark answered. But Emily, nobody is going to make you do this. If you say no, that's your right, and none of us will think less of you. Emily was quiet for a long moment, staring at the kitchen table like it held answers. Then she looked up, and her eyes were wet. I want to meet her first, she said. Sarah. And Grace. Before I decide anything, I want to look my sister in the eyes. We drove to the Riverside Motel together that night. Mark, Emily, and me, a strange caravan of a family trying to absorb a new branch that had grown onto our tree without warning. Sarah opened the door of room 14 looking exhausted and terrified, holding Grace's hand. Hi, Sarah said, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, I don't know how any of us are supposed to do this. None of us do, I said, and to my own surprise, I reached out and hugged her. She stiffened for a second, then broke down against my shoulder, sobbing like she'd been holding it in for months, maybe years. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry, I never meant to blow up your family, I just didn't know where else to turn. Grace was running out of time, Anne. You didn't blow up anything, I told her firmly. You found your father. That's not a crime, Sarah. That's not something you need to apologize for. Emily knelt down slowly in front of Grace, who was clutching her stuffed rabbit and staring up with wide, curious eyes despite the dark circles beneath them and the way her small scalp showed through thinning hair from the chemotherapy. Hi, Grace, Emily said softly. I'm your Aunt Emily. Grace tilted her head. Are you going to give me your bones? Emily laughed despite the tears streaming down her face. I'm going to give you something inside my bones, yeah. If that's okay with you. Grace considered this very seriously, the way only a 4-year-old could. Will it hurt you? A little, Emily admitted. But not as much as it would hurt me to lose an aunt I just found. The room fell silent, everyone crying now, even Mark, who wasn't a man prone to tears. But 3 days later, everything we thought we understood collapsed again, when the hospital called Sarah with results from Grace's expanded genetic panel, and Sarah called Mark in a panic, her voice breaking apart on the phone. Mark, she said. I need to tell you something about Grace's father. Something I never told anyone. Because I think it changes everything about who's actually allowed to donate. what is it? Mark asked, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. Sarah, what's wrong? The genetic panel came back, Sarah said, her voice shaking. Grace's leukemia, the specific type she has, it's linked to a rare inherited marker. And it's not from your side, Mark. It's from my biological mother's side. From Renee's family. Okay, Mark said carefully. What does that mean for the transplant? It means Emily might carry the same marker, Sarah said, and I heard her voice crack completely. The doctor said if Emily has it, the transplant could work initially, but there's a chance Grace could develop the same condition again in a few years, from cells that carry the same predisposition. They want to test Emily first before we move forward. I'm so sorry, Mark. I feel like I keep bringing this family nothing but bad news. Emily, sitting beside me on the couch, went pale as I put the call on speaker. She reached over and took my hand. Test me, Emily said, loud enough for Sarah to hear. I don't care what the results say. I already told Grace I'd help her. I'm not backing out because of a complication. Emily, if you carry the marker, Sarah started. Then we'll find another way, Emily said firmly. But we're not giving up before we even know. The testing took 9 agonizing days. 9 days of Mark pacing the kitchen at 2 a.m., of me sitting beside Grace's hospital bed reading her the same rabbit book over and over because it was the only thing that made her smile, of Sarah apologizing every single day for a situation none of it was actually her fault. On the 10th day, the doctor called. Emily didn't carry the marker. The transplant could proceed. I have never in my life heard a sound like the one that came out of Sarah when Mark told her. It wasn't crying. It was something deeper, some kind of relief so enormous it came out as an animal sound of pure release, and she sank to the hospital floor with her hands over her face while Mark knelt down and wrapped his arms around the daughter he'd only known for 2 months. The transplant happened on a Thursday morning in June. I sat in the waiting room with Sarah, holding her hand, while Mark sat with Emily as they prepped her for the bone marrow extraction. 6 hours. 6 of the longest hours of my life, watching the clock, watching Sarah's leg bounce with nervous energy, watching nurses walk past with expressions that gave nothing away. When the doctor finally came out, he was smiling. It went well, he said. Very well. We won't know for certain if it took for a few weeks, but the extraction and transfusion both went smoothly. Grace is stable and resting. Sarah collapsed into my arms, sobbing with relief, and I held her the way I'd held my own daughter 1,000 times before, because somewhere in the last 2 months, without either of us quite realizing when it happened, she had become my daughter too. 3 weeks later, we got the call that Grace's blood counts were rising steadily. The transplant had taken. We had a small gathering in our backyard the following month, nothing fancy, just burgers on the grill and a folding table covered in a checkered cloth, but it was the first time our entire family had ever been in one place. Emily sat on a lawn chair with Grace curled asleep against her shoulder, bald head resting against her aunt's collarbone, a stuffed rabbit tucked between them. Sarah laughed at something Mark said, really laughed, for the first time since I'd met her. And I stood at the grill flipping burgers, watching my husband, the man I had once, for 3 terrifying weeks, believed was destroying our marriage, laugh with a daughter he never knew he had. I owe you an apology, Mark said later that night, once everyone had gone home and the yard was quiet and dark. I should have trusted you from the beginning. I should have told you everything the moment I found out. You should have, I agreed. But Mark, you spent your father's inheritance saving his great-granddaughter's life. If your dad is watching us from somewhere, I think that's exactly what he would have wanted that money used for. Mark's eyes filled with tears, and he pulled me close, and for the first time in months, I felt our marriage settle back into something solid, not the same as before, but something stronger, wider, big enough now to hold 2 more people we hadn't known we were missing. Grace turned 5 that October. She has a full head of curly brown hair now, and she calls Emily Auntie Bones as a joke that never seems to get old to her. Sarah moved into an apartment 15 minutes from our house. She comes for Sunday dinner every week. And every single time I watch Mark scoop his granddaughter into his arms, I think about that envelope I found on his desk back in March, how certain I was that I understood exactly what was happening in my own home. I had never been more wrong. And I had never been more grateful to be wrong.